Welcome to Sun, Sand, and Sold. I am Josh Tomey, joined as always by my co-host, David Haber. David, back here in the studio and looking forward to welcoming now Commissioner Vicki Lopez from Miami. The commish is coming on the show today. Really excited to talk to her about what's going on in Miami-Dade County. You know, it's so interesting. She was a Florida legislator and now on the county commission board. And I think it's going to be interesting to hear about how she has navigated that shift. And I want to hear from her.
Interesting transition.
It is, right? And I mean, on some levels, when you first hear that, you say, like, is it a parallel move? Are you stepping down? Are you stepping closer to your constituents? I mean, I know she's obviously on a smaller commission than the legislature is, right? But at the same time, what kind of power do they wield? What kind of difference can you make on the ground?
Each one of them has a fiefdom.
Right, they do. So it's going to be interesting to hear about that.
Nice shirt.
Well, thank you very much. You as always, but occasionally I like to compete with you on this.
Yeah, well,
this is actually a hand painted Christian Dior shirt. That's part of my prize collection.
How do you wash a hand painted shirt?
You don't. If you smell anything, it's because I have to wear this very infrequently, and it's nothing. I mean, to compare to yours, of course. But
mine is a classic.
Well,
it's a classic Haber shirt.
Well, we'll see what Commissioner Lopez has on. We'll see what she has to say about her. But she has to say about her style.
She's a brilliant woman, hardworking, public servant, and I commend her for coming down here and rolling up her sleeves and trying to deal with what she has been dealing with in the state, which I presume in large measure is, affordable housing, workforce housing, and condominiums.
Yep. She was so much a part of so much a part of the condominium reform that we've seen to date. And I'm sure that she probably has some other things to say about what's yet to come, which we're certainly.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear what she has to say.
I'm curious from your perspective, legally, David. I think a lot of our listeners and viewers don't necessarily understand the interplay between the county and the municipalities that are in them, in terms of who ultimately has authority.
God knows they fight over it enough.
Well, and again, we've had the mayor of the county on, we've had other mayors on, and, I think what is often at stake is what it is that the county's position on a particular issue is in their constituents and how much that either aligns or potentially butts heads with the municipality. When we had Mayor Levine Cava on, we talked a lot about the need for municipalities to get on board with some of the public transportation infrastructure.
And also the live local, which cities were looking at as like a death knell, and the county is looking at it as a savior.
We talk about live local on the show a lot. From your perspective, why is it looked at as such a four-letter word right now? I mean, it's like every time live local comes up, it's like, oh no, not live local.
Because you have people that are anti-development, anti-high-rise, and they don't want it in their backyard.
Right.
It's like everything else. Nobody wants public housing in their backyard. Nobody wants a jail in their backyard. Nobody wants live local in their backyard. And it's a myopic view. And I think in the long run, it's a bad view.
Right.
But it has to be, tinkered with in order to, temper justice with mercy.
Right. Following our interview with Mayor James up in West Palm Beach, I've thought a lot about the idea of a lot of our areas here in South Florida becoming kind of two-class zones where you have, sort of the big gleaming monolithic ultra luxury condominium towers stand on their own.
Well,
and they create their own sort of micro.
Just look at downtown, and then you look at
right, and then you go 6 blocks to another direction. It might as well be two different cities.
It is two different cities, and it's unfortunate that we don't, as Mayor James made very clear, have opportunity for all.
Right.
We need to create opportunity for all, and we've got to create economic zones where the disenfranchised and the lower income property owners and renters can lift up, because if you ultimately have the super rich and the super poor and nothing else,
right,
you have a major, major socio and economic problem.
Right. And it seems like in the urban cores here in South Florida, that seems to be one of the major issues at stake. In my work with developers, what's really interesting is if you go up and down Biscayne Boulevard through Edgewater, for instance, you will see sometimes these plots of land that are empty. And of course, everyone says, well, how are they not building here already? And when you look at the value that an owner is holding out for, and then you realize on an underwriting perspective how much money you would have to put into that property, it almost becomes impossible to develop it unless you've got sort of a, whether there's some kind of incentivization and to say, well, now we've got this underutilized land right in the middle of the urban core that could be used for mixed use or affordable housing or whatever it happens to be. And to say, but our real estate values have gotten so high, it actually precludes development. People are holding out for that incredible price of, $45 million an acre.
You see that in Normandy Isle, you see that in North Beach. A lot of it has to do with federal taxation, believe it or not, because if someone's been holding a property for 30 or 40 years and they're 75 or 80 years old, if they die owning that property, they get a step up in basis to fair market value on date of death, and they're not paying, all that tax on the increase in value. That makes a huge difference in terms of their estate. So people hold properties that are not necessarily in good shape,
right? Because
the land value is so high,
right?
And they don't want to pay 25% capital gains tax.
And doesn't that seem to be, from your perspective,
it's antithetical to what we need?
Right. An opportunity to say, can't we create incentivization around that to say, let's alleviate some of the burden of that concern. Let's incentivize a developer to come in and through the combination of those resources, create workforce housing, create some mixed use housing that does create more opportunity. Because
Little Havana, down in Homestead, all of these areas that have people that bought for low pricing, and now it's worth a lot more money. We've got to find a way to reinvigorate, and we need to, redistribute that land.
Yeah. And from my perspective, especially in the downtown cores, because we want folks who are workforce level to be able to walk to work. We don't want to have to constantly put more cars on the road. We don't want, listen, public transportation reform sounds great, but you and I both know it's going to take a long time for something substantive to happen there. Why wouldn't we want to take advantage of some of these areas that could be redeveloped or developed for the first time and offer that? But obviously that has to come from some kind of legislative effort. I've got a feeling that Commissioner Lopez may be operating here in the county now because maybe being closer to those issues actually creates more of that opportunity for somebody with her purview.
Well, we'll see how she can navigate the politics of Miami-Dade County,
right?
Which some have called the Wild Wild West.
Some have called the Wild Wild West. We're looking forward to having her on the show. And what's going on for you right now?
I'm actively looking at what's going on in the Middle East. Very concerned for our soldiers. I'm a very patriotic person, and I'm praying for all of them. And what else is going on?
Well,
Bam Adebayo, 83 points.
That was very impressive.
And I have to tell you, he is not the guy I would have expected to score 83 points.
He was not. But again, it's, I guess you're putting your name up next to Wilt Chamberlain and Kobe Bryant is certainly something I would not have. You were texting me during that game, and I was watching my team. You were watching your team, and David was texting me
64,
76, 77, 78.
It was crazy.
It was. That was
insane.
An aberration. I have seen Haber Law in the news lately. I know you're dealing with a pretty significant case in the Brickell area on
I got Aston Martin
on Aston Martin, and
right on downtown.
Without getting into depth on that particular case, it does seem to me like so much luxury and super luxury development has come on the last 10 years. This can't be the last time either your firm or other firms are going to be dealing with these kind of representation cases. It seems like, especially with these big branded luxury properties, there's a lot of promises being made, and delivery is often at question.
I want to ask Representative Lopez, well, now the commish, I want to ask Vicki, my friend, I want to ask her, how do we deal with bait and switch?
Right.
Because I feel like other states would be much more heavily regulated on bait and switch, and declarations say, and prospectuses have the little, footnote that says we can change anything at any time.
By the way, none of this means anything.
Right. Here's all this glossy. I'm going to show you pictures, whether it's marinas, helipads, spas, restaurants. I'm going to show you everything. But, oh, by the way, I can change it all on a moment's notice, and you can't do anything about it. That to me is a bait and switch, and that to me is wrong.
Help me and help our audience from a legal perspective, because you're certainly literally at the center of this. What the difference is between the old school sort of misrepresentation. When I came up in the condo world, it was like if you put it in the glossy and it wasn't there, they had a claim. And you're saying there's now these sort of carve out exceptions, or at least that they're trying to give themselves that are somehow some kind of relief valve on that. How did that come to be?
So it used to be that you could sue for unfair and deceptive trade practices. But the courts have recently, over the last 10 years, held that those are individual claims of an individual purchaser, not a collective claim of the entire condominium. And that takes away a lot because an individual owner risks a lot by suing the developer for a Florida Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practices Act claim. Then you have fraud, and fraud again is individual because every individual is represented to differently at a different time by a different person. And there's a state statute that allows for suits regarding representations within 1 year. But again, those are individual. I would like to see a condominium be able to go after a developer for a bait and switch on behalf of everybody.
I mean, effectively a class action of the community,
Yes,
correct?
Yes, because everybody's losing.
Right.
Now, it's not one person. If it's in the prospectus and then you do the bait and switch, the condo association, for the betterment of everybody in the condominium, ought to be able to sue the developer for bait and switch.
Right.
And maybe that'll change developers' attitude
Right.
towards
I would say
making
that seems
the
like
changes.
it's potentially
Because
solution building.
they're not going to change it until they get caught.
Right. I got another question for you on that subject, and I've actually gotten a lot of questions directed to me. This reminds me of an early interview we had in season 1, actually, with David Podine from your firm. We talked about the branded condos, right? We talked about this style of condo that took on a brand name from another industry, whether it's cars or shoes or whatever.
Well, there's a lot of cars.
Right, a lot of cars. And
Porsche, Aston Martin.
Sure. And
which other ones? I can't remember.
You're putting me on a Bentley. There's a Bentley.
Right.
So in these cases, so I'm imagining, and again, not getting into depth on your firm's particular case, but I'm imagining when these stories hit the news, this is not necessarily doing the brand any good.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute.
At what point? And I know David Podine talked to us in the show about the brand, the licensor still has some authority, and I got to imagine there's authority in there that says you are damaging our brand reputation. We're out.
So I would say the people that are on the boards of these condominiums are very sensitive to the branding. I know they are at Aston Martin.
I got to imagine it's part of the pricing premium.
And then the goal has to be, if the developer doesn't meet the standard per se or meet the expectations of the owners, the board has to step in after turnover and rise to the level that the licensor, which whether it's Bentley, whether it's Porsche, or whether it's Aston Martin, whoever it is, that they expect. And I think they have tremendous incentive to do that because they want to keep the branding and they want to keep the prices up.
Sure.
So you have to, unfortunately, provide the services that the developer may not have provided. You have to now increase the budget,
right,
and you have to do what you can to get these properties to where they were expected to be.
And then essentially hold the developer ostensibly accountable for the delta, and to basically say.
And how do you do that if you cannot sue as a collective?
I was going to say, and so then you're doing it on a one-off basis and saying, so now you're representing what personal damage me as an individual might have.
Good luck trying to find out what that is when there's no marina or there's no heliport or whatever.
What the prorated portion of that calculation, if a formula even existed.
I don't know that you could even, I don't know. I'm not going to give legal opinions, but I don't know how you can determine for an individual something that really is a collective loss.
Right. Well, we will keep watching Miami Herald and local TV to see
I'll keep watching to see if you can ever wear that shirt again.
Listen, speaking of branding, this is my brand representation today on the show, and you've got your own going. Again, let's just see what Commissioner Lopez has to say about both. In the meantime,
I can't imagine that she's not going to be bedazzled by my shirt.
I'm putting the money on me, but we're going to see what happens when we come back from the break.
Well, I'm sure it'll be impressing upon her.
Well, she's sitting close to me, so the fact that this has not been laundered may actually require her to shift over a little bit.
But it's good to see you again.
Likewise. In the meantime, you are watching Sun, Sand, and Soul. Josh Tomey with David Haber. Please join us, as always, on your favorite social media and podcast channels, which include
Spotify, Instagram, Apple, X.
Apple Music, X, right?
Facebook.
Facebook still.
Yeah.
And if we're playing old school MySpace, we should get a MySpace page. Remember MySpace, the old days of MySpace?
That was the beginning.
Remember
of it all.
Tom from MySpace used to welcome you? We are not on MySpace. We're not on MySpace, but maybe we'll talk about it. Also on LinkedIn, of course, and links to all of our podcasts and the video on YouTube as well. In the meantime, we'll be right back as we get joined by the Honorable Vicki Lopez, Commissioner of Miami-Dade County.
Commish.
We'll be right back.